Okay, so hi, I'm Chris McEntee. I'm currently a game and level designer at an independent studio called Moon Studios. They're known for their most recent, their one game, Ori and the Blind Forest. I did not work on Ori and the Blind Forest. I joined them very recently, but I'm working on their next unannounced amazing game, so we're going to see how that turns out.
Which one is it?
You almost got me. Sneaky bastard. So, anyway, I am currently a game and level designer with Moon Studios. I have a history in the video game industry, not a super long one, but a decent one, and I'm going to be talking about that in this little presentation today. But I haven't always just been a game and level designer. I've actually done a number of different things over the past few years that I've been making video games and working on game stuff. And it's just been a really interesting experience throughout the years doing all these different things, and I just want to talk a little bit about what happened, what got me where I am now, and what each of these little experiences along the way really meant to me and how they formed the way I turned out in the industry. So basically, this is just about my own little personal journey through the game industry and becoming a professional. And the talk is called From Passion to Profession because I really believe that, I started with this passion to do something, to make games, to be an artist. And I found it interesting the way to turn something that raw into something that you can actually make a living off of. So I just want to talk about a little bit about my physical journey through the world because I haven't always been in Mexico. Otherwise, I'd be speaking Spanish to you guys. So I was actually born in Gringo Land, as you can tell from the giant burger. I'm from California originally. And so I lived there until I was around 13. And in that time, that's the beginning of the journey because that's where I became a gamer. I grew up, I was around 6 when I got my N64. I grew up with Mario 64 and all these awesome games. And I just became a gamer from day one, and I always have been, and I always will be. And so that's sort of like step one was getting that passion for games as a player. Then, when I was 13, my family moved to Germany, which you can tell from the giant beer. So I was in Germany for a while, and in Germany I was in high school, and that's where I kind of discovered that I could actually make games, or at least I could modify games and do cool things in them. And that sort of opened up a whole new world for me because it really made me realize that I can do more than just play games. And I'm going to talk about all these in detail, but this is just to show you the steps. So then, after I finished high school, I graduated and I found a university in the Netherlands, in Holland, where I actually was able to study visual art for video games. And that helped me solidify the base that I had before from my sort of personal experience to then realize that, hey, there are proper ways to make games, not just, doing what you feel like in your room after high school. And after I graduated there, I ended up in France for a while, working at Ubisoft for 5 years. And that's where I worked on the Rayman series for 5 years. I worked on 5 different Rayman games, and that's sort of like the base for my professional experience, let's say. And then I jumped straight from that to Mexico, here in Monterrey, where I'm working for Moon Studios remotely. It's a studio where everyone works from home in different countries, so I'm here, I followed my girlfriend, and I'm just working from home, and it's pretty interesting. So that's kind of where I've been, and I don't know where I'm going to end up in 2018 or whatever, but hopefully somewhere new and fun. So what I started with was modding, and I had this game that my brother and I and my best friends played a lot, like a shit ton. Like we wouldn't stop. It was the one game, and it was Warcraft 3. And it was really awesome. I mean, we played the story, and that was fun. Good awesome cinematics. Who am I kidding? But the thing is, I didn't really like the actual RTS part of the game so much, especially the online. It was boring. But what I was really drawn to was the custom maps, because there was so much unique, awesome, cool stuff in there, like tower defenses and Dota and all these kinds of really awesome maps. And when I realized they were made by other people, I was like, this is so cool. We can actually take a game that's, to me, the core game a little bit boring sometimes, and turn it into something completely different without actually being a part of the team. That's really badass. How do you do that? And so my brother and I were talking at some point. We played Warcraft for at least 2 years up until that point, that we were like, maybe we should try to make our own stuff. Why not? Why couldn't we do it too? So we looked into like people that make them. We found some forums, and a specific forum called Warcraft 3 Campaigns, which was like one of the biggest modding forums online for Warcraft 3. So we just we signed up, we started reading through discussions, and we were like, oh, these people are cool and they're doing really cool things, and maybe we should try this too. And then we had to decide what we wanted to actually do, because it's like you don't just say, oh, I want to mod. You have to think, well, what do I want to modify? Because modding comes from the word modify, because you're not building a game, you're taking a game and you're changing it into something that you want. And so it was like, well, what do I want to do here? I could model, I could texture, I could make levels, I could make sound, music. And so I was looking around and I was like, okay, there's a lot of people making models, there's a lot of people doing textures, people are making levels and maps. What's something that no one's doing? Because I was like, why would I want to jump in and start doing something that there are hundreds of people already doing? Because I don't have any experience, so I'm just going to jump in, and it's going to be like, who's going to look at my stuff? It's going to be garbage. So why would they look at it when there's so much nicer stuff to see? But if I do something nobody's doing, they have to look at my garbage because there's nothing else to look at. And I wanted people to see, because I wanted them to give me critique and feedback. I wanted them to tell me what I'm doing wrong so I could learn how to do it right. So what I noticed was nobody was doing animation, because it's hard. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Modeling and model swapping and texturing, you have tools like GIMP and Blender where you can do these you can learn these things pretty quickly. But animation is something a little bit more complicated to learn. And so I said, yeah, that sounds good. I'll learn that. And so I found some tutorials online. I did not necessarily legally purchase 3ds Max. I obtained it somehow, and I taught myself how to animate in 3ds Max. It was Max, if anyone cares about the technical side, specifically because there were art tools specifically made by Blizzard for 3ds Max, because that's what they used to create the assets for Warcraft 3. So basically, and that was released for the public along with the modding tools. So I was like, okay, well, this is the tool that I want to use if I want to modify Warcraft 3. And so basically for 2 years when I was in high school, I would come home from high school, sit down in front of my computer, and I would animate. And I just tried different stuff, and I kept going. And the funny thing is, the more I did, because they were terrible at the beginning, let's be fair, but the more I did, it got better little by little, and the more people started noticing my stuff. And since I was one of maybe, let's say, 3 or 4 people on this entire big forum actually animating, people started to notice. They were like, oh, this guy can animate. Nobody's animating. That's awesome. I have a model. Can you do something with my model? Can you make it move? And it's like, yeah, I can make it move. Do you want me to make it move? Yeah, do it, man. Do it. And they send it over, and I'd be like, what do you want it to do? And they're like, I don't know. Surprise me. So, okay. And so that I would just come up with these random things, and they love it because for them it was like a surprise. It's like, oh, I made this really cool character. I don't know what he's going to do. And it's like, and then you make him walk in a really fun way, and they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's awesome, And the thing is, it was just like a positive cycle, because the more I did, the more people talked to me, and the more people talking to me gave me more things to do. And by the end of the 2 years, I'd done so many different characters and animations and things, and eventually I became known as one of the animators in Warcraft 3 modding at the time, because no one else really was doing it, or out of the people that were doing it, I actually got enough experience that I was doing a pretty decent job. And then while I was doing all of this, I actually was asked to join some team projects, some people that were planning on doing a whole new race for Warcraft. And that's a lot of work. You have to make a lot of characters, design a lot of things. And so I joined that, and then after some time, the team lead liked my contribution so much, he asked me to be a lead with him. And so then I started leading this project. And then on top of that, I was joining competitions to see who could do the best work and this and that, which competitions were very motivational because they force you to really pump out good work really fast. And you want to be the best, so you work extra hard, and usually that produces the best stuff. So that was really motivating. And on top of that, they actually asked me to be a moderator on this forum and the second biggest forum for Warcraft 3, because I had been doing so much stuff and people knew me and they were like, oh, this guy could be a moderator too. So on top of taking all this work from people who wanted me to animate stuff, I was doing extra stuff because I felt like it and because it was cool, but it was a lot of work. And honestly, I learned a lot from this modding experience, and it was sort of like taking all of this stuff on at the same time for someone who was just a kid in high school. The fact that I was able to do it, or at least I enjoyed doing it, maybe I didn't do everything well, but I enjoyed doing it, that helped solidify the fact that I could make games for a living, because I enjoyed it so much that no matter how much people gave me to do, I wanted to do it. And that's the passion I was talking about. You know, it was something that I just had in me, and this was what I wanted to be doing with my time, outside of school, outside of everything else. And what's interesting about modding, I'm sure a lot of you probably know this, but in case you don't, like, these 5 games, very popular games, they were all mods that became professional games. So, for example, Dota 2 was a Warcraft 3 map, Dota, and it was super popular, and it was so popular that Valve hired the guy who worked on Dota to come to Valve and make Dota 2 for them. And League of Legends was made by the guy who originally made Dota, the Warcraft 3 map. And those are 2 of the biggest games right now, and they're making a crap load of money. And they were mods. They were modders, people that were passionate, that wanted to do something totally different in Warcraft 3, and they ended up making these huge hit, like, standalone games. DayZ was an Arma mod. Counter-Strike, I believe, was a Half-Life mod. Team Fortress 2 was a Quake mod. It was Team Fortress at the time. And the Stanley Parable was also in Half-Life. So basically, there's a lot of, like, modding is a very valid practice. If you're a modder, you're not necessarily a lesser developer, or like not a real game developer. You are really developing games. It's just that you're taking something that's already there and you're adding your own touch to it, your own flavor. Like the characters that I built for Warcraft 3, they were totally new. I wasn't necessarily like taking something and tweaking it a little bit. So it's a brand new creation. It's just that I'm putting it in an existing game instead of building the engine and building the gameplay and then dropping the model in and making it walk, because that's complicated. But if you have a team, if you find people that are willing to go, like, put in this effort and make a really cool mod, you're basically making a new game. And I think that's a really great starting point for anyone that wants to make games that doesn't really know how or what they want to do, is just jump into a forum, find modders, and actually just start building stuff. You don't have to worry about all the basics of, basic collision detection in Unity. Oh, God, how do I do that? Because that's already done. Most of the game is done. The whole game is done. It's just up to you to make it more fun. So that was the first step into video games for me when I was younger. And I felt like I already learned a lot, but I wasn't necessarily sure that, I could just jump into a game studio and make professional games. I was just animating, and they were little models. They weren't that detailed. So when I graduated, I came across this university in the Netherlands that was making, visual art for video games. Game architecture and design is what it was called. And I was like, this is pretty freaking cool. I can actually go to university to make video games. I can get a degree for making video games for a living. That's cool. So I went to this school. I spent a few years there. I learned stuff like 3D modeling, texturing, life drawing, animation, game design, level design, programming, all of it, writing even. We touched on a little bit of everything. We made a bunch of different games, and it was exhausting. This is an actual picture of me that my buddy took, the asshole, where we were in some class and I was sleeping because we did an all-nighter before. We'd been crunching super hard, and this probably happened once every 2-3 weeks. It was a really, really intense course. And I have a picture of him doing the same thing. He's holding his tablet and his mouth is open. I can't think he's holding onto his pen on the tablet, but he's totally asleep. So it wasn't just me, but everybody in the school worked their asses off all the time. And I enjoyed it. It was important, and I think that I learned a lot from working so hard. But learning to make games was not easy by any means, and it required that passion. It required someone who was dedicated. Because actually, out of all the people that joined the course at the beginning, I think we started with 120 students. By the end of the first year, we were something like 35 or 40. So 80% of the students drop out in the first year, and that was every year, not just mine. Because it was so intense. Because people join and they think, I get to play video games all day and I get a degree. Awesome. And it's like, no, you don't play them, you make them. And that's a totally different thing. It's a lot harder. What was cool about going to school for video games versus actually just making video games like in a company was the fact that we could experiment and do different things. Because we're not worried about revenue, we're not worried about selling or target audience or any of that bullshit. We just wanted to make a fun game, cool experiences. So for example, we had an experimental platformer where you've got 2 sticky balls. It's like you're chewing gum. But anyway, you can stick to things and you can swing around. It was something we hadn't seen before. We actually got design awards for it from some event like South by Southwest, I think. We made some cool experimental arcade game on a never-ending surface. We made educational games for chemistry, and each game taught us different things about game development, about our tastes, the way that we work with each other and that kind of stuff. And even making an educational game is awesome because you learn so much about the subject that you're teaching, because you have to teach people something, so you should become an expert in it. Like this, I made a chemistry game, and when I was in high school, I loved organic chemistry because it was kind of like a puzzle. And so I thought, oh, that'd make a good game. And I thought that I remembered enough to make the game. And then when I started thinking about, okay, how do we build this and this, and I was like, shit, what was that rule again? And I had to go back and I had to research it. But by the end of making the game, I really was an expert on this stuff. Because if I want to have any chance of teaching you something, I need to make sure that I understand it. Like if you're making a Mario game, you need to eat, sleep, and breathe the jump curve that Mario has if you want to build Mario levels. Because otherwise, you're just going to be placing random blocks and then, oh, it doesn't fit, doesn't work. So just like anything, you need to really understand all of the systems involved. But I think that making an educational game is cool for that. Because if you take a subject you're not that familiar with, it forces you to familiarize yourself and learn something. So that was a very worthwhile experience for me. And that's because I was in school. I wasn't worried about any of the typical industry stuff. And modding didn't really support that because I was taking a game that existed and tweaking it. This was the first time that we could actually build a game from scratch. And that's kind of overwhelming for a student too, because it's like, we could make anything. We could make World of Warcraft, but better. And that's usually what happened, and then they failed, but miserably. So another thing that happened when I was in school, which was very lucky, was that I met a guy who had a website called Nisute, which was it's basically a games media website, kind of like Kotaku or Polygon. And he was in the same city that I was studying in, and he asked if I wanted to write for the website. And he wasn't going to pay me for it. But I thought, okay, fine, I'm a student and cool experience. I like to write, could be cool, right? And I didn't even know that by being in this organization, I would get a free badge to go to GDC or to go to the European equivalent of E3 and stuff. Because as a press person, you can get into these things for free. You can skip to the front of the line. So there was a line, a 3-hour waiting line for Diablo 3 a few years ago, and I got to go to the front, and then I left and I went to the front, and then I left and I went to the front again because I had my badge. And I got to meet developers, I got to interview them, I got to go to a Nintendo preview event to play the games that were shown at E3 that you won't get your hands on for another year or two or something. And basically it was just a super cool experience to get to go to these events without even being a professional yet. And it was just because I joined as a volunteer to work at this website, and it opened up all of these doors, and I had these contacts and these opportunities, and it was just a lot of fun too. But it would take time away from school, and we were already exhausted from school, so it was a bit tough to juggle everything at once, but it was totally worth it in the end. So if you ever have the opportunity to work with some kind of press or journalism or anything within the game industry like that, it could be interesting for these kinds of benefits. You never know, even if it's not paid. So I wanted just to run down a couple things that I random things that I learned while I was studying before I move on to the next part. And the first one and the most important one is that everybody started with an overly ambitious project. Like I said, they wanted to make WoW, but with time travel. Or they wanted to make Team Fortress 2, but with whatever. And then it's kind of okay, sure, they write a document this big, and then their prototype has a block that doesn't collide with walls, and by the end of the project, they finally get it to collide with walls. And it's okay, so this is what we wanted to make. We barely made anything that was actually playable. What the hell happened? But we spent time in design meetings and discussions and arguments and concepts, And we, as the years went on in school, we quickly realized that you start with something small, you make it work, and then you add on top of it. But you don't start with the whole pile of carrots and then try to eat it all at once, because it's just not going to happen. And I'm just mentioning it because it's still true today. There were people in my studio that had that same attitude, surprisingly enough, and it failed miserably because it's just nobody in the team can take them seriously because they're so focused on this huge vision and stuff. And it's no, calm down, relax. If it doesn't work out, we have to try something else. And they held on to their ideas because they were so precious. And it's no, you have to lose that attitude and just focus on what we can do and small achievable goals. So that was lesson number 1 from school above all else. This one was kind of a funny one. I didn't expect it, but I don't know if anyone has experience with you're playing games with your bros and you're having some beers and some pizza and you're dude, we should totally make a game. And it's like, yeah, we should totally make a game. That would be amazing. Oh, cool, we could do this and that. And you start writing down ideas and stuff. And you don't do that, because the thing is that when you start working with your friends, like in school, I work with my friends. It's like, oh, we have to make a team. Great. You. Oh, all-star team. Let's go. The problem is that being friends with someone does not mean that you can work with someone. They're two very separate, different things. And you don't really realize it until you experience it. But it can even kill friendships too. And at some point in school, it kind of almost killed a couple important friendships for me. We recovered afterwards, but because it just got so serious and so heated, and we were fighting all the time and stuff. Because just because you're friends doesn't mean that you agree on the same methods of making a game, or you have the same thoughts on gameplay mechanics. You know, maybe they like fast-paced gameplay, and you like thought-provoking, like RTS style stuff. And it just won't work. And what I noticed was, when I was put on a team of people I didn't know, first off, it went way better, because I didn't have to worry about hurting their feelings. I could just tell them what I thought. They tell me what they think. In the end, we're professional about it. But what's funny is I became friends with them, and now they're friends that I could easily work with again, because we became friends through working together. So I know that I can. But they're not friends that I made before, and then I think, oh, cool, let's work together, and then and it ruins everything. So just be cautious when you're buddies and you start talking about making a project together. Think about, what can they actually do? What can they bring to the project? Do they have skills? Are you on the same wavelength about lots of things, or just about one or two things? And just be careful, because you don't want to, first off, you don't want to ruin the friendship, and second, you don't want to ruin the project. This is just a general theme I have for everything in this talk, is that I try to always have a lot of determination and perseverance, and I always tried to push as hard as I could for things. I saw students in my school. Actually, I started school in 2008 with some students, and one of my friends is still in school today finishing it, and that's 8 years of school basically, and he's still not finished. Because every year it's like, it's okay, I'll catch up next year. I'll do one project this month, and we'll see what happens after that. And the thing is that they weren't determined, they weren't pushing hard enough, they didn't want it badly enough. And I find it really important that you do that. I graduated in 4 years, the normal amount of time. It was hard as hell, but I pushed really hard to do it because I wanted to get out of school. Like, after the first 2-3 years, you're kind of like, okay, well, this is cool and everything, but I think I can make games now. I don't need to be in school for this anymore. But you have to finish it. You don't want to waste the time. And I saw an increasingly larger amount of students that were taking this sort of attitude of like, it's college, I can hang out an extra year, what's the big deal, if I'm still young. And then it's kind of like 6 years later, 8 years later, are you still young? Are you still just chilling in college? Like, what's going on? And the same thing applies to professionals too. People that just sort of like lay back and just say, okay, I'll do my job, but they don't really progress. They don't go further like they want to because they're not pushing for it. And then they complain years later like, oh, but I should be lead. Why am I not a lead? And it's like, well, you never really pushed, did you? You never really showed that you could do it, because they had this attitude of like, I'll just do what I'm told, and if they want, and then if they give me what I want, that's cool. So like, I always find it very important to push for the things that you want and to work hard and know what you want and go for it 100% all the time, because otherwise you're just going to sort of be disappointed by the result, and you really have to work for it. When I was looking for an internship at my school, I had to prepare a portfolio of work, like when you're applying for any kind of job. And I was looking at what my colleagues were doing, my classmates, and they all had the same portfolio because we all had the same work. We all were in the same classes. We had to model a fish. We had to do this. We had to do that. So everyone's portfolio had a model of a fish and a drawing of a girl. And it was kind of like, so wait, didn't I just see this portfolio? Oh, no, but this one is from this person. And I was worried because I was like, crap, if I put the same projects on my portfolio, no one's going to have a look at it because it's going to look the same. It's going to look like everyone else's. And so I decided to try something totally different, and I put everything on my portfolio that was unique to me, like my projects, even if they weren't always the best one, but it was something that I was proud of that was uniquely mine, to really make sure that my portfolio stood out from all the other ones. And it's true with anything, really. Like, it ties back to what I said about modding. I was like, what can I do that other people aren't doing? And I did animation because of that. And it helped me in the long run because no one was doing it, and so everyone was looking at me because I was the one doing it. And you don't want to stand in with the crowd because it's a competitive industry. You really need to make sure that people see you for what you can do and they're interested. And connections are very important. I can't lie. Actually, the three times that I got hired by companies, or at least that I got jobs, all three of them started with a connection, sort of making the introduction. My first job, a teacher said, hey, this guy really needs the job, and he's pretty good, so can you help me out? And then they said, we'll have an interview, and I got the job. The second one, a teacher saw my portfolio, said, this is really good. He contacted Ubisoft, and they contacted me. And the third time, a friend applied to Moon. They said, sorry, you don't have enough experience, so he sent me instead, and then they sent me a message. It's unnaturally easy, and I can't really, say how to reproduce that kind of luck. But what I can say is that over the years, I've been going to events as often as I could. I've been meeting people, like here, for example, getting business cards, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever, just meeting people, making connections. And it's a bit sad to say, because I know some people don't feel comfortable with leaning on connections or asking for help because it feels a bit cheap or it feels a bit underhanded or something. But it's really just the way that every industry works. It's just about a connection helps you, you help someone else. And that's the way I see it. Every time someone asks me for support, for help, can you look at my portfolio? Can you send this on to someone in Ubisoft? I say, yeah, sure, no problem, here you go. Because I think it's really important that I it's like karma. Like someone helped me out, so I help someone else out, and everything is right in the world. And so I think that if everyone has that sort of mentality, then it's not a bad thing, because we're all just a big network of professionals and passionate developers that want to help each other, be happy. So connect with the people as often as you can. Don't burn connections, and just try to keep in touch and network as often as you really can, because it's really going to be important for finding jobs in the future. So after being in school, I got an internship at Ubisoft, in Ubisoft Montpellier, which was the studio known for making Rayman, making Beyond Good and Evil, and other really artsy, creative, cool games like Valiant Hearts, which is a World War I puzzle game. Some friends of mine worked on that. And so basically I entered as an intern on Rayman Origins, where I was making levels. And being a kid that grew up with Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, all these really awesome, colorful platformers, like when they contacted me and said, hey, do you want to be a level designer on Rayman? I was like, yeah, awesome, perfect. Like I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity to do my internship. And it delivered. I mean, I was able to build 7 levels, 2 bosses in 6 months, and the team was very dynamic. I jumped on the team right at the beginning of production, so it was like when all the exciting shit was happening, it wasn't just okay, we're going to do some concepts. It was like, okay, work. And they treated me like a professional. They didn't treat me like a student, which was great. It means they gave me a ton of work to do, but it was worth it. I learned more in 6 months at Ubisoft on Rayman than I did in 3 years at school, I think. But that's just normal, that when you're in a real professional environment, you pick things up quickly, and there's just stuff that you can't learn from books and from lectures. You really have to learn it by experiencing it. And so this was like a crash course in everything video game development. So then I got lucky, and they gave me a contract after I graduated, and I stuck with them for 5 years, and I worked on a range of Rayman games. So I have a little bit of experience with the franchise, a bit too much sometimes. But and what was really interesting is that I started as an intern, and when I left last year, actually I left this year, I was content director and lead designer on the most recent Rayman mobile game. Because over the years of working on these games, I proved to them that I could do more, and I kept asking for more and saying, come on, I can do this, I can do that. Or I would do a level, and I'd be waiting for something, so I'd say, okay, I'll start another thing. And it's like, oh, what are you doing? Well, I had some free time, so I wanted to start something else. Oh, that's cool, And taking that initiative made them realize that I could do more than just be a level designer, and that's really important, because a company doesn't always find or see that potential in you just inherently. They don't just look at you and go, you seem like you could be a good leader. You seem like you could do something else. You need to show it to them. And a lot of people, they think just by working for 5, 10, 15 years at the same job is going to be enough to prove to them that you can do that. But what it does is it proves the opposite. It proves that you're perfect for this role, and you should stay in this role for the rest of your career, because that's where you're going to perform best. But if you keep telling them I want more, they're going to have to listen eventually, because otherwise it's either they listen or they fire you. But if you're good, they're not going to necessarily fire you that easily. And that's that determination thing I was talking about, is if you push hard and you say, I want more, and you really try your best to prove it and also tell them it. Like, they will listen, and at least in my case, it worked out for the best, and I was able to do more. What's interesting about this, too, is for most of my career, up until that point, I always wanted to be a creative director. Like, I think that's what everyone kind of wants to be, is like, oh, I want to be the creative director of some big game someday. That's the dream, you know? And so when they asked me to be this like content director, it's kind of like lead designer for the project, basically. I was like, yeah, cool, I can do this. And now I think I'm happy to be a game and level designer again instead of being a lead designer, because after that experience I realized it was a lot of management, it was a lot of talking, a lot of discussion and business stuff, and I felt like I was so detached from the game, like not all the time, but a lot of the time. I felt I was so detached from the actual game itself that it was kind of soul-sucking. I was like, no, I don't want to do this, I want to be making the game. And I'm glad that I had this experience so early, because otherwise maybe for the next 5-10 years of my career, I would have this like image in my head of like, I'm building up to be this lead designer and it's going to be amazing, and everything I would do would be pushing towards that goal. But now I can take a step back and go, maybe it's better if I just, continue being a designer and keep making awesome stuff. Because that's what got me started, was the passion to make really cool content, cool things, fun stuff. And I felt like maybe I lost that vision a little bit in that position. And by having that experience, taking the opportunity, I learned something about myself that helped me come back to where I want to be, at least right now. And another cool thing that happened at Ubisoft, apart from meeting Tim Schafer, was the fact that I was able to speak at a number of different conferences, a little bit like this, but more people. And it was just really... What was funny was that I told them, hey, I'd like to speak at GDC. Can I do that? And they said, yeah, okay, why not? So I applied and I got to go. But then the more that I did, the more Ubisoft would think, hey, we need someone to speak for something. Send Chris, he knows that stuff, he's good at that. And so then pretty soon I was the guy at the studio for presenting anything. And it's good to be in that position, because it's like being the guy to go to when you have an animation problem or a programming issue. It's like, oh no, ask him, he's the tech master. And you want to be that guy because that means that you're invaluable. You're like, they need you in that studio. You're an important person. And I like doing this stuff, so obviously it wasn't a problem. But it was just cool that I could do what I wanted, and that Ubisoft could send me places to give talks and stuff, and that it was actually beneficial for their perception of me as an employee too. So if you ever have opportunities to do more than just what your job description says, I highly encourage doing it, because it can only be beneficial. Like, you take the risk. If it sucks, well, at least you tried. And actually, you can't do worse than me, because the first time I spoke at GDC, my shitty laptop overheated in the middle of the talk, went to a black screen, and I had about 5 minutes of turning my computer back on and starting my talk again. And it worked out okay in the end, but, it can't be worse than that. So you should be fine if you ever do anything. I will go back again in the future, but I need a little bit of time first. And just, this is me on my last day of work at Ubisoft. It was the 20th anniversary of the studio, so kind of a nice end. So, and now, like I said, I'm working at Moon Studios. So just to reiterate, it's a small studio. We're about 16 people. And actually, Ori and the Blind Forest was made by around 20, maybe a little bit less. I don't know if you know the game, but it's pretty gorgeous and pretty impressive. And I didn't do anything, so I can say that. And so we're kind of smaller than they were at that time. We're probably going to grow a bit more, but not too much. And everybody works from a different country in the world, because they want talent where they can find it, and they don't want to have to worry about relocations and visas and all that kind of stuff. So it's beneficial for us because we can live where we want. I can be flexible to go somewhere new in 2 years if I want to. And it's good for them because it means they can hire anyone and they can start almost immediately. So Moon is a very interesting indie studio, and the project I'm working on is pretty cool. I'm sure you guys would like to know what it is, but I can't tell you. But trust me when I say it's going to be cool in a few years. But it's a very interesting experience too. What I like is that, again, it's something totally different from before, because I'm working from home, and I've never done that before, except when I was a modder. But that's different. You're working in your parents' house, you're working outside after high school and stuff, but now I'm actually working at home, and I have to motivate myself to work 8 hours a day for money, So it's kind of like, if I don't do the job, I'm kind of screwed. And I was a bit worried. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but I'm getting used to it now. And it's very cool, and it's a nice change of pace. Because honestly, after 5 years at Ubisoft, things were getting a bit stale, a bit too much of the same thing. So it was cool to just throw it all away and do something different. And like I said, going back to being a game and level designer now, I'm like rekindling that passion for making games and not just the business side of it, which is kind of boring at a certain point. And what's nice at Moon is that it's such a small studio. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you working at small studios know that you can do a lot of different things. Like, I'm a game and level designer, but I'm also writing some story. I'm also working on this and that. I can do some animation if I feel like it. I don't have time right now, but maybe in the future. And that's really refreshing too, because in a company like Ubisoft, at a certain point it gets very structured, and it's like, no, you don't go outside your box. You do what you're meant to do because there's someone else to do the other stuff. So that's where I'm at now, and I'm enjoying it, so it's pretty cool, and I'm liking Monterey. It's nice so far. I like the food a lot.
Yeah.
The food isn't going to like my stomach in a few years, maybe. So I just want to go through a couple of takeaways before I conclude the whole thing, just so that way you can maybe retain something from this very personal talk. I think modding, I really strongly believe modding is an excellent way to sort of get started in the game industry, or even just do your whole game career in modding for all I care. I mean, it's awesome. It's never been a better time to be a modder. I mean, when I was modding, there weren't games like Mario Maker, where the point of the game is to make levels in the game, or Little Big Planet, or I don't know. It's never been a better time to be a modder, and if you're having a rough time getting used to tools like Unity or learning really core concepts for programming and stuff, though there are a lot of programmers in here apparently, but still, I think that modding is a very cool starting point for making games, and it's a very valid way of making games too. There's nothing wrong with modding, in my opinion. Always acknowledge your strengths and take risks. Like I said, just try everything, say yes to a lot of things. If it turns out badly, well, whatever. At least you tried. But most of the time, in my experience, it turns out very well, and you're better off for taking the risk. And what's funny is that I went into school wanting to be an animator, obviously, because I was doing that before. And I walked out a game designer simply because I realized that through those years of making games in school, I realized that I was more of a designer. It just came naturally. And so it was something I had to accept. And I said, well, I could push to be an animator, which would be fine, but I think that I feel more natural and comfortable being a designer. And I'm really happy with that decision, especially because designers can do a little bit of everything too, which is it's not really fair, but we can kind of touch whatever we feel like because we're kind of in the middle of everyone. So it's not a bad position to be in. And like I said, do a bit of everything and be open-minded. You never know what an opportunity is going to bring you, and you never necessarily know if you're going to like something or not until you try it. But don't be scared. Like I showed at the beginning of the presentation, I've touched a lot of different subjects. I actually worked as a tester for a while, and then they made me a 3D modeler and stuff. So I haven't always just been a professional designer, but I think that all those little experiences helped make me a better designer. So they're very important to me. All the stuff I talked about really helped make me who I am today. And dream big, even if your hands are super tiny like this Yoshi, dream big, because if you stop asking for more, if you stop pushing, you're going to stop moving. You're going to be stagnant. And the only way that you can move forward and get better is by pushing and trying for more and trying harder. And then one last little fun thing. I was looking through the old forum from the modding days the other day, and I found this little thing where this guy tells me to get my ass off Warcraft 3 modding and do something productive, like a real job for animation or something, because that was in the end. That's when I was doing my best stuff. And there were some people telling me, oh, it's really nice, I like it and stuff. And then I said something like, yeah, but there's no job for a low-poly animator like me. I doubt any reasonable company would take me. So that was my cynicism back then. I was like, no, there's no way that I'm going to, actually make games. This is just for fun. And then I look at it 9 years later, and I'm like, oh, look where we are now. We did a pretty decent job, So it's just fun to see that, and that was the passion that I had. I had passion for modding. I had passion for creating things. I wasn't thinking about the profession. I wasn't thinking about how am I going to make money off of this. I was just focused on doing cool shit, showing people, and making people happy. And I still feel like I have that passion today, and that's what drives me forward. So what I wanted to end with is, if the clicker would work. So just because I'm a professional now doesn't mean that I'm any less passionate. And I think that's the key thing to keep in mind is keep the passion burning, even when you're a professional, when you've been doing it for 5 years, 10 years. I've seen people that lose that passion, and you can tell that it has a very negative impact on their career and just the way that they feel at work. And the people like myself that that still have this like raw passion for video game development, we keep pushing, and it makes a really big difference. So it's not a trade. It's not you lose the passion to become a professional. It's you become a professional with the passion. You bring it with you, and you try to keep it as long as you can. So that's it, and thanks a lot. I hope you learned something. Do we have time for questions?
What would you feel and what would you do if you had a project you were proud of and thought it was of value, but then because you didn't make backup of it, end up losing it somehow? What would you do?
What is it that those samurais do when they shove the sword in their chest and they sort of like twist it a couple times? Exactly. It sounded a bit dirty, so I wasn't sure if that was the word. I don't know, like the thing is, you would learn to make backups. But it's happened so many times at Ubisoft and even now at Moon that I'm working on something and my computer crashes because it's the same piece of shit that crashed on me at GDC. I don't know why I'm still working on it, but and I lose my work and it's frustrating, but it's not an entire project. I mean, I don't know how you lose an entire project because that's a pretty big mess, but you drop the hard drive in the toilet or something, I guess. But anyway, it's really rough, and from my experience of losing work in general, it really sucks. But what's kind of funny, though again it doesn't really translate well to losing a whole project, but what I find is when I have to rebuild something because I lost it, it usually ends up better and cleaner than what I lost. Because I know where I'm going, and I know that I don't need this, I don't need that, and I just start with the bare minimum. So sometimes it's actually a good lesson, first off, to remember to save your shit. But second, that sometimes less is more. You start cleaner and fresh, and sometimes you work on something super long and you lose sight of it, and it's better just to throw it away yourself and start from scratch anyway. But anyway, it's an emotional thing when you lose something that you care a lot about, and I don't really know what to do except don't kill yourself. Just keep going and make even cooler stuff. But use Google Drive maybe, or cloud storage.
Anyone? Yeah.
You moved from a AAA company to an indie group. How is that different from indie to a AAA?
That's probably a tough one because I've only experienced one direction, kind of. Because I worked at another company when I was in school, but that was also kind of a AAA company. But the thing is, going from AAA to indie was very refreshing because at Moon Studios, everybody cares 100% about quality. Like, we want to make the best freaking game that we can possibly make. And that's an attitude that I was missing at Ubisoft at a certain point. Because on Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends, it was there because the creative director was around, he was very passionate, and he wanted to make awesome stuff, and the team was small enough that we could really push. But when we got into bigger, more productions and more like factory-style stuff, we kind of lost that attitude. And so coming to indie was very refreshing. I can imagine that for an indie going to AAA, it feels a bit like going to a sausage factory, and you're the guy that pulls the lever once every 2.5 seconds, because it's kind of like I'm the one guy that does. For example, when I was working as a modeler, a lot of my time was spent optimizing characters. So I just had to remove an edge loop and another edge loop and another edge loop, and I was kind of like, okay, next character. Get that poly count down, My boss called me Optimize Prime because I was always optimizing all the freaking models. And it felt like factory work. At the time I was a student and it was paying my bills, so I was like, fine, optimize. But I can imagine that when you're used to making games like in a small team, lots of passion and whatever, and then you go in and you're like, remove, save, next for like 150 characters, it gets really exhausting. So... but there are teams within Ubisoft, for example, that are smaller, more indie-style teams. It's just that the business people creep in after a certain point, and that can kind of ruin everything. So I'll tell you when I've experienced it, when I go back to AAA, but for now I'm kind of happy this direction. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. At Moon Studios, does
feel like an institutional company, like talking about business and stuff, or just like more like a bunch of friends or something like that, the point between them?
It's more like a bunch of friends. I mean, we're still business, we're still a company, and usually when we're talking about like work stuff, we're very professional about it. We can joke once in a while, but we usually stick to get to the point. And actually, the head of the studio hates business and hates HR stuff. He hates all of that. Like, for example, when he contacted me to work at Moon, he said, hey, can we have a Skype chat? So, okay, I talked to him on Skype, and after one call, he's like, okay, so when would you be able to start, and this and that, and it's kind of like he didn't want to go through the whole process of, okay, let me talk to this person, let's do this and that. He just wants, like, when can you start? Great, tomorrow, cool, done. And then he focuses on the game, because the team really only cares about making an awesome game. So if they can let other companies, like Microsoft published Ori and the Blind Forest, and if they can let other companies like Microsoft deal with the business, the marketing, all that bullshit, and we can focus on making a game, that's what they care about. And that's what I love too, is that the boss, the guy, the CEO, the one who makes all the money and stuff, he's the lead designer, and he's the one that's doing like most of the design. Not because the other designers like myself aren't working, but because he knows what he wants and he pushes harder than anybody else. And I find that very motivating, because it sucks when you have a boss that doesn't do anything all day and you're just kind of like, because you don't know what to do or you're not motivated. So it's that pure indie experience, but they have a really good background thanks to Ori and the Blind Forest. So it's kind of a nice position to be in because it feels secure, but also free.
Yes.
I'm comparing also the difference in the aspect of working remotely and working presently, physically, with the studio at Ubisoft. I've been also working in-house and also remotely, and I know that it's not the same thing. I want to ask you, how do you feel on both sides, the good and bad points, and also how do you do, because I think it should be not like so good. How do you cope with remote work? Because I think everybody here will face that point at some point, at some time in their lives. You have also, we are all connected to the internet, and we can apply to a remote job position, and there is something that you need to have in your mind. You need to be prepared for this. I want to know a little bit about your advices for this.
Okay. So obviously working in-house, working in a studio is really cool because you get to talk face to face. You can grab someone and say, look at my screen, instead of saying Skype call, wait 5 minutes. Skype call, wait 5 minutes. Oh, he picked up finally, bad connection, shit. You try to share your screen and, it's the wrong window, some things take ages remotely, especially if the person's not available or around. You have to deal with that. And in person, you just grab someone and say, hey, come on. So stuff gets faster. But on the other hand, when you're in a studio like that, it's easy to be distracted because people go to get a coffee and they want to go sit on the couch and chat and, let's go grab some lunch, let's go to the restaurant and this and that. Especially in France, they take 2-hour lunch breaks because they have to have time to find the restaurant, sit down, have an appetizer, get their wine, have a coffee at the end, and walk back. You don't want to run because you don't want to upset your stomach. And so that's how I do my lunch breaks here now, and I can because they don't even see me. But the thing is, I liked working in person with people because you can be in a meeting, you can discuss things. But I do feel like we wasted a lot of time in those meetings. Let's talk about this and let's go talk about that. And in remote, it's more like everyone's autonomous, they're responsible for their own time, which means that everybody sort of focuses on getting as much done as possible with the time that they have. So that's more productive for the game. If you don't need to be involved in something, you just don't pick up the phone and you focus on your stuff. And actually being at home, it's different, it's tough. And actually at the beginning, I was working from a hotel room for the first 2 weeks here, and trying to not wake up my girlfriend in the bed next to me while I'm working in the dark, because I have to wake. Oh, that's the other thing. I have to wake up at 5 a.m. because it's a European company, so I have to be kind of on their time. So it was tough at first because I'm not a morning person. Ubisoft told me, when I started, you can come in anytime between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So I was there at 10:01 every day because I'm not a morning person at all. And now I have to be. So that was a bit tough. But the thing is, yeah, being at home, it's also a bit dangerous because no one's looking over your shoulder all day. Like, even if no one's actually watching you when you're in an office, you still feel like there could be someone passing by. So you don't want to have something stupid open like YouTube or this and that, you know. But at home, it's kind of like, they can't see me. No one's here. It's just me and my dog. I'm in my underwear. Who cares? You know? And so it can be easy to sometimes get sidetracked, and you're like, oh, let me just read that one Wikipedia article about X-Men Origins, and then you're like, oh, and all of a sudden you're reading something totally different 2 hours later. So that can be dangerous, and it takes some level of focus. Or what I found is a plugin for Chrome that blocks websites after like 10 minutes each day or something. So if you're on Facebook for more than 10 minutes, no more until you're done with work and stuff. It helps. But you have to be a certain kind of person, I think, to really do the full-time at-home thing. When you're a freelancer, I guess it's different because it's not really 9 to 5. It's like you have 1 week to make something, so work your ass off in the last day, do a little bit every day, whatever, but deliver the product. But this is like a 9 to 5 job, kind of, more or less. So you still have to feel like you have to push to do those 8 hours every day. But it's really flexible too. Like I work for a few hours, I take a breakfast break, a few hours, big lunch break, French style, you know, and then I can work until I feel like it in the evening. I'm enjoying it simply because it's a change. And as you can tell from like I've been moving different countries consistently over the past 13 years, I'm someone that likes change. So, and big changes. So going from something like Ubisoft to something smaller and working remotely in Mexico, it's like perfect for me. It's like, yeah, 100%, let's go, let's do this. But it's not for everyone, I guess.
Do you do something like playing games together or some kind of socializing?
With my teammates?
With the teammates?
So far, no, not really, just because we're all in different time zones too. Like my breakfast is someone else's lunch or dinner. And so it's like, oh, they're available to play a game. I'm in the middle of my work day. What am I going to do, you know? But to be fair, next week, or actually on Sunday, I'm flying to Vienna. We're all meeting up together. Normally it's once a year. The team meets up in one country and has a retreat and gets to know each other. Because I haven't met my colleagues. I know them on Skype, but I don't know their faces. I don't know their, you know, who they are and what they do outside of work. So it's cool to actually get to meet them next week. Maybe I'll hate all of them and I'll quit the company, but for now it's going to be fun. So there's that, but no, at least for now, we haven't done any of that stuff outside of work time, but maybe it's because I don't know them yet. Like, I know the business them, I know the work them, but not the pastime, like, what does he do in his free time version. And maybe after this, we're going to connect, and then I'll have some, like, closer friends, and they'll be like, hey, you want to do this, you want to do that. But it's still the beginning. I've only been at Moon for like 3.5, 4 months, so it's really just totally new, and I'm getting used to it, but I like it so far. It's different.
Great.
Yeah.
What do you think about the JavaScript frameworks like Phaser? I mean, for start making video games.
I'm not really a programmer, so I'm not super up to date on all that kind of stuff. But I know that Minecraft was made in Java, and apparently it sucks. No, because a buddy of mine's working at Mojang, and he said that like the mobile version is in C++ and it's so much better, and Java sucks and stuff. But honestly, I really don't know much about that, so I can't answer. I'm sorry. But I do know, just to maybe give some kind of interesting answer, I was a bit worried about moving to Unity, like because I was working with other tools at Ubisoft before, and I was a bit nervous, like, oh, I have to start a new program, how's it going to work? They expect me to be really productive, and I don't know the tool and stuff. But it was pretty quick to learn, and I'm used to it now, so I like that. I know it doesn't answer your question at all, but it's all I can do. Sorry. Yeah.
What is your philosophy of video games?
That's a really deep question. I don't. Could you be more specific? Because otherwise we go get a beer and some hot wings and we talk about it for 4 hours, but that's a different thing.
What does a video game really need to have?
Yeah, it's more specific, but still vague. It's changing, I think. Like, well, maybe not. Because when I was a kid, I always liked those really, like I said, Banjo-Kazooie, Mario 64, like Wave Race, lots of Nintendo games. But I liked them because they were sort of like these smaller, very self-contained experiences. Nowadays, you've got these games that are online, too many, like so many players and updates and DLC and all that stuff. And I'm getting really exhausted of all these really big titles with guns and this and that and whatever. And I'm finding myself enjoying games like Gone Home or Firewatch or even Until Dawn. It's a big game, but it's not that big. It's its own little self-enclosed thing. I'm enjoying them more because I can play a game in like 6 or 8 hours. I finish it. I feel like I've accomplished something. And it usually has some kind of deeper meaning to it. It's something to think about. It's not just kill, 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 be the bad guy, be the badass guy, like Duke Nukem or something. I do like silly, stupid, retarded games like Duke Nukem once in a while. It's always fun. But when it comes to making a good game, like I'm really appreciating those more, which is why I like indies now. And that's why I'm really happy and proud to be an indie developer, because indies are really the ones that are doing all the interesting stuff, I think, these days. But I still think that games in general usually should be fun. Some of those like indie story-based games aren't that fun, but they're very like deep. And there was a game that I played recently called The Beginner's Guide, which is from the guy that did the Stanley Parable. And after playing that game, I couldn't stop thinking about it for like 2 weeks. And I love those kinds of games where you play something and you can't get it out of your head, and you start reading about fan theories and this and that. And especially this one because it was about game development and psychology, and it's an awesome game for a game developer to play. And I like it when games can touch the players like that, and I think it's changed for myself over time, especially as a developer. I like to see that stuff now because I can connect to it on a different level, and some of my favorite games are things like Smash Brothers. I love these games where you just sit on a couch with buddies and play together. I like that more than online. Online is cool for me now because I can play with my friends in Europe, which I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. But if I can find a buddy here that wants to play Smash Brothers, that's like the best because it's just fun. That's how I grew up, sitting on the couch playing N64 games with friends.
I thought about your workflow. Does it affect that you don't have someone to ask? Like you before were in a big company that you have a lot of people to ask about the stuff you don't know. Now that is by web and without people, how does it affect your workflow?
Yeah, it's tough because, for example, the programmer could be offline because he's sleeping or doing something else. And if you have, the thing is, at the moment we're at a point in the project where it's still early enough that nothing is really a big pressing matter, like, oh, I need someone to help me fix this right now or else we're all screwed, So it can wait until tomorrow morning or something. But yeah, it is a bit tough if I really feel like I'm blocked by something and I need to ask someone for help and they're not online to give me any information. But it's just something that you have to deal with. Usually it's just a matter of writing to them, asking, can anyone else help me? Does anybody have the same problem? And it's just one of the issues of working remotely. But I think it's not the way that Moon does it right now because it's still like a young studio. But I think that a way to solve it would be to have more documentation as well, like about tools and things. So if you're troubleshooting, it's like, wait, I'm having an issue with this tool. A lot of the times it's, oh no, you just have to restart Unity, And that's the stupidest thing because you're waiting for someone to tell you what to do and you just have to restart Unity. But it's just something you have to deal with. There's no real solution right now anyway.
So when you get to that point, where is the first place you look for an answer, for a solution?
I think I just wait. What I usually tend to do when I'm stuck on something is I don't sit there and bash my head on it for like too long. I move on to something else. So because I have to wait for them until tomorrow, I open up a document and I start writing some new design out, or I start a new part of a level, or you know what I mean? I try to come up with something different or write a piece of story that I think is interesting to feel like I'm being productive, or to be productive while waiting for an answer. Because even if I'm blocked on one track, the other tracks are open and I can keep going. So the thing is, like I said, I'm not a programmer, so it's not like I'm blocked on something and I have to look for the Unity help, or I have to go to Unity forums and ask them, how do I do this? Because a lot of what I do is using tools that the team made on top of Unity. So the support for that is them, and there's no documentation. So if I need help, I really need to ask the guy who made the system, and if he's not there. So I just try to keep myself busy in the meantime.
Thank you.
Were there moments when you felt making games were not your thing, or the passion was starting to feel to fade away or something?
No, the thing is, my passion for example, for Rayman, after so many years working on so many similar games in the same franchise, my passion for Rayman was pretty low at a certain point, but that's not anything to do with games. It's just about being tired of looking at the same guy with no arms and no legs, for too long. But it was a worthwhile experience to push forward on, so I forced myself to stay motivated, and I've always found something in the project to motivate me every day. Like, we had a new system where you could tickle your little things that you're collecting, a bit like Pokemon. You could tickle them and they do animations and make sounds. And so then for the whole day I'd be showing people, look what we can do now. Oh, check it out, it's so funny, isn't it cute? And that got me motivated through that day. And then I found something the next day that was going well. But no, I think the only times that I've thought that maybe I want to do something other than games is when I see an awesome movie, like animated film, and I think, why didn't I be an animator and make movies, because this shit is awesome. I wish that I could be a 2D animator because I love that stuff. But I don't see it as something that I couldn't do in the future. I see it as, if I'm really passionate about it and I want to try it, I just start doing it and see where it takes me. But for right now, I'm very happy making games. I wish that I would start my own side projects more. I wish I had done that earlier, and I wish I could find the time to do it now, but it's a bit difficult. But I think that it's very important that while you're working on a big project that takes years and stuff, to nourish yourself with side projects to keep your brain thinking about other things. But yeah, I've never really had doubts about being a game developer. And I think that the fact that I do talks like this and I meet people at events and I try to do as much as I can in the industry, I think every time I do something like this, it raises that motivation bar a little bit more. So sometimes it's it goes out of the container, because there's already so much, and sometimes it's running a little bit medium, and then it gets boosted back up by talking to people. So no, I've never really had many doubts, and I think that's why I'm continuing to do what I'm doing, because it just feels so natural to me. It's what I was destined to do.
Did you quit at Ubisoft before this?
Yeah. Did I work at Ubisoft before this? Oh, yes, I quit Ubisoft. I had a contract with them that had no ending date. I could stay for the rest of my life, and that scared me because I didn't want to be stuck in the same place for the rest of my life. But it was good to have job security, obviously, and at a certain point, you say, do I need the job security or do I need something fresh and different? And also, when your girlfriend wants to go to a different country for a job, sometimes you think maybe this is the push I needed to get the hell out of here and do something different. So all the pieces fell into place. But yes, I quit Ubisoft. They tried hard for me to not quit Ubisoft, but in the end, Moon was a better option for many reasons. So I just said sorry. And at my going away party, I was talking to the head of the studio, and I was like, well, it was nice working with you. He was like, so when are you coming back? We'll see, maybe 10 years from now.
You already had the job offer from Moon?
Yeah. No, I didn't quit Ubisoft and then look for work. No, I'm not silly. Please, some credit. No, I was already looking for work since maybe October of last year or even earlier, looking at different opportunities. And a buddy of mine applied for Moon, and they said, no, you don't have enough experience. And he said, okay, too bad. And I was just at a party with him at some point. He told me about it. And he was like, hey, would you be interested in working at Moon? And I'm like, I haven't played their game, but yeah, it looks pretty cool. Why not? I didn't know anything about them, but I was interested. And then they immediately sent me a message a day later saying, hey, let's have a Skype chat. And I talked with them, and I realized, hey, this is the option that allows me to come to Mexico and still be doing more interesting stuff than I'm doing now and be indie at the same time. So yeah, then I quit Ubisoft because it was no question. It's this is better. And I still had to work at Ubisoft for 2 months after quitting, so I couldn't start immediately. But it's fine because it was the time necessary to prepare papers and get ready to move and stuff. So it was okay.
Yeah. Perdón, una pregunta más porque ya me están corriendo.
So I just wanted to ask you about some portfolio advices and what do you think is the future of the video game? VR is a big thing right now. But what do you think is going to be next after?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first, because that one I can probably answer more. Well, it's just an opinion anyway. I think that VR is awesome. I think it's going to be tough to make it be more than a gimmick, because right now it's a lot of put on a headset and go, wow. And that's basically it, because there's not much else to do. Now with the Vive, you have the controllers and like the painting tool, the tilt brush is awesome. Like I could spend days literally just in that thing. My eyes would probably melt from the screen, but I could spend days like doing 3D paintings and stuff, and I love that. And I think it has enormous potential. I mean, we're going to get to a point where it's like the Matrix. And I think that's very, very interesting. I mean, if you look at what games were in the 80s and what they are now, there's no doubt in my mind that in 10 years, VR is going to be, like, it's unimaginable. You're going to be sitting in a vat of water in like what's it called, the tank from Stranger Things, you know, like sensory deprivation tank with your VR thing on, and wow. So I think it's interesting, and I think it's cool that devs are pushing for it right now, but I think that the best like experiments so far in VR are the ones that are trying to do different things, like that are really pushing the boundaries. And the people that are trying to make, like, let's say, a Call of Duty in VR, they're not working very well because they're not accepting the constraints of the new hardware. You know, it's like making a 3D game, but using the rules of the 2D game. It just doesn't fit. So there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be experimented with, but I really strongly believe it's the future of games. But it's not the only future of games. It's one of the branches, because there's always going to be a market for playing on the TV. And for the portfolio advice, if it's personal, like just your portfolio, you can always send me an email. My email's on the website and whatever. You can send me a PM on Twitter if you want. But if it's general portfolio advice, like I said in the talk, it's about standing out from what other people are doing. If you can make an interactive portfolio, if you can make a portfolio that's a game, you know, something like that is something that people are going to go, holy crap, I've never seen this before. If you do a VR portfolio, perfect, you know. But other than that, just don't put too much stuff. Put just the right amount, like to show them that you have variety, but it all has to be good quality stuff too. And the worst portfolios are the ones that cram too much stuff in to the point where you don't know what to focus on, and you just say, screw it. And the best ones are the ones that have, you know, a decent amount of work to show. Oh, he's done a lot, but what he's showing me is really good. And then you assume that they've done more. That's the trick, you know, to make them believe that you've done more when maybe you haven't. So, that's it. Gracias.